Jason Moss, welcome to the Star Coach Show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, everybody's going to be very excited that you're here because we are going to dive into the very thing that, as business owners and coaches who are in business, we want to know. Like, how do we get more people to work with us? We have a passion to help people get to their goals, but we've got to get in front of them. Meg's favorite saying, we can't be a secret and be a success at the same time. So Jason does so many great things that I'm going to tell all of you about in just a moment. And in that, when we put our heads together and said, what's the thing that's going to really move this audience forward? We looked at, if we want to get our message out to people, one of the great ways we do that is through this free social media that's out there. But what do we say, and how do we connect with our audience? I will tell you, teaching and mentoring over 100 coaches a year, what I hear on a regular basis is, I don't like social media and I don't know what to say when I'm on social media. So Jason is going to help us with that. Now, if you are watching us on YouTube, we want to say hello and to let you know that the links that we're going to be talking about, all the things to connect with Jason, are going to be right below this video. If you're listening wherever you listen to the Star Coach Show, be sure to check out the show notes and connect with Jason there as well. And gosh, subscribe to the show so that you get all of our shorts. You get notified whenever something new comes out, because we have new stuff coming out all the time. New stuff highlighting tremendous guests like Jason Moss. So let's talk about why it was important to me to have Jason get in front of you, because you guys are precious to me and I only introduce you to really special people. Jason is special in many ways. Let's talk about what lit me up about having him on the show. He is a multi six-figure business coach. He helps online business owners like yourselves scale, and this is key, in an ethical, high integrity way, using marketing strategies that make sense. We're going to talk about those in today's show. Now, Jason started his business in 2016, which happens to be when the Star Coach Show started. So that was another like alignment thing that we had. He was making less than $5,000 a year in revenue. So he spent years refining what works. And now he's going to bring to us like what works. Let's talk about what works. That makes so much sense. He has a thriving community. Um, when you work with coaches, you work with, you have both a Facebook group, right? And an online community. So we're going to talk about all of that. What we're going to really zero in on today is, what do we say in posts that connect us to our audience? So if you, as we go forward, be sure to bring in like the different things you do and the different ways you connect with people. But I just can't wait another minute. Jason, let's start about this concept of messaging. And before we dive into the different things that we want to focus on, what's important about messaging?
Yeah, well, what an amazing intro. I don't think I've ever been introduced in a more vibrant, more more amazing way on a podcast. So thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Excited to have this conversation with you because it's so important. It's really the foundation of, when I work with coaches, probably the number one thing that comes up for folks is, how do we get clients and what do we say in all this content, right? So in terms of messaging, I think the first thing to understand is, what's the goal? Like, what is the point? Why are we creating this content and what are we trying to do in this content? And if you know what you're aiming for, I think we can kind of work back from that and figure out what the words need to be and all that. So I think of messaging really like leading somebody by the hand, step by step by step, from stranger to client. And when we zoom in on that and we look at, well, what does it actually look like? The way I think about it is, there's a certain number of things that someone has to believe in order to want to work with you. there's a very specific set of beliefs. In other words, one belief might be, like when someone first finds me online, they have no idea who I am. They have no idea that I can actually help them and that I have expertise in the area that they need help with. And then at some point, through the power of my message, through the words that I use, if I say the right things, I connect someone to that belief or that moment or that insight where they go, oh, Jason actually knows what he's doing in this marketing area, and I actually really need some help with that. He's an expert. He's someone who has expertise in this area. He can help me. That's an example of a belief shift, a moment where somebody connects to a specific belief. And when we do a good job in messaging, what we're really doing is we're leading people by the hand, step by step, helping them connect through our words to a very specific set of these beliefs. And these beliefs, I kind of think of them as like things you have to check off in your messaging. And when you do a good job at this, what you do is you lead somebody by the hand, step by step, from I have no idea who you are, you're a complete stranger, to here's my credit card, I'm ready to sign up for your program. So we can zoom in on that, but really on a high level, that is the goal of great messaging. And so when I'm thinking about content and when I work with clients to help them on this piece and give them feedback on their copy and their content, what we're really looking at is those beliefs and how good of a job are we doing connecting people to those beliefs through the words and through the message.
So important. And with that, you have 8 core beliefs that you know to be true, that when we can weave them in authentically, ethically, um, at bringing that value in some ways, because what it's doing is it's sort of evoking awareness for the people reading it, like, oh my gosh, that's true, that's true, that is true for me, and I want a solution for that, or I want results regarding that. So what we're going to do today is we're going to walk through these 8 core beliefs, which means that as much as I would, I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I want to ask 800 questions about each core belief, but I'll try to maintain control. Where do we want to start in these 8 core beliefs?
Yeah, and this is so, if I would have understood this, I just want to like frame this by saying this is
Yes.
like the keys to the kingdom. Like, I know that sounds dramatic, but I spent years just feeling super confused when it came to messaging. And I knew I needed to create content, but I had no idea what to say and all this stuff. And it took me a long time to really understand this and to put this together. And understanding this has made such a dramatic difference in my business. It's been the difference between making, $4,728 my first year as a coach to scaling past $500,000 a year in sales. Literally just like this has been probably, I would say at least 50% of it is like understanding this piece. So I just share that to frame this conversation because I think this is something that is so powerful and just makes the whole journey of messaging so much easier. So to answer your question, what's the first of these 8 core beliefs? The first of the 8 beliefs is pain. And I think of pain as kind of like the first 2 beliefs, pain and desire, which we'll talk about both of these. These are kind of like the foundations of your messaging house. It was like,
Okay.
this is everything else rests on this. A great way to think about pain is, when I was growing up, I used to watch a lot of TV. I don't really watch TV anymore, but I remember I used to love watching like QVC or like those like infomercials, at night. And, you'd see the infomercial and the infomercial will come on. Let's say they were selling you like new pans, right? And so it was like a infomercial all about buying these new nonstick pans. And how would the infomercial start? It would start with the black and white image of someone in the kitchen scrubbing their pans with a look of frustration on their face because their pans are not cleaning well. And the voiceover would say, do you ever feel like you're wasting all this time at the end of a long day scrubbing your pans that just don't get clean? And you could see how much pain this situation is causing this person. This is the first of the 8 core beliefs because as coaches, we get paid to solve and help other people solve problems. People come to me because they want help growing their business, and maybe their business isn't growing, or maybe clients are inconsistent, or they're not getting the leads they want. Like those are problems that I help solve. So the first thing that I need to do in my messaging is really connect to that person's pain and create that moment where someone feels seen. This is the
Mhm.
powerful thing about messaging is it's really about holding up a mirror to somebody else. And when you're able to reflect someone's pain back to them, what you do is you create a moment where someone else sees that and they go, this person understands me. This person understands what I'm going through. And this is where I think the ethical piece comes in because this is not about like, you know, making somebody feel bad or, preying
Right.
on their pain. It's really more of a moment where you can say, "Hey, I see you going through this right now. I
Right.
see you. I see you. You're awesome and you're amazing. And I also see that there's this thing in your life that you're really having a hard time with. And here's the impact that that's having on you. And I see you in that. So, first belief
Yeah,
is
it's
really
seeing through
pain.
that lens, which is what we do as coaches anyway. We want to kind of meet them where they're at, see through their lens. And you're saying that's part of what we use in our messaging. I see you. Because
Yes,
feeling alone and isolated and not understood is is something that is a pain point that many of our clients are at, or they feel very alone or isolated, or that they're the only ones. And so when we say
yeah.
you're not the only one, I see you, I understand you. Love
Totally,
that.
100%. And being able to reflect that, whatever that pain point is, back to that person, and really in a way that helps bridge that gap is really the first of these 8 core beliefs. So this is just as simple as asking yourself, what is the pain that my ideal clients are experiencing? And if, that could change
Mhm.
depending on obviously what kind of coach you are. If you're a health coach, maybe it's, you're helping people lose weight. Maybe it's here's what life is like when you're maybe not feeling like super confident with your body and being able to talk about that pain. Or maybe if you're a business coach, it's helping people who are not experiencing the results that they want in their business and maybe they're struggling financially and being able to talk about those things. So just getting clear on what that pain point is and
Right.
then being able to mirror that back to people in your messaging is the first of these 8 core beliefs.
I love that you said that this is almost foundational, or sort of the pillars that, so one is pain and the other is desire. Tell us about the desire.
Yeah. So what I think, when I think about coaching, like a sale and an offer and what we do is really it's about facilitating transformation. We help people
Mm.
go from point A to point B, and people pay you to go from point A to point B. They're somewhere in their life today and they want to be somewhere else, and so point A is the pain. That's what we just talked about, the thing that someone doesn't want. Point B is what's on the other side of that. Because if I feel like I have a painful problem in my life, but I don't feel connected to a vision or a sense of desire around something else that I want that's not that pain, there's no desire to make a change. But if someone can show me, like, hey, it doesn't have to be this way, and look at this other thing that you could be experiencing on the other side of this, and look at how good that is. As an example, like you think of a lot of commercials. I'm just using a lot of commercials for examples because I think they do a good job of this. But you ever see a commercial for like a cruise or like a I don't know like a destination vacation or something
Hmm.
like that? And what do? They show you the relaxed people on the beach, and they're playing with their kids and their family, and everyone's laughing and they're like prancing through the sand, and everybody looks so joyful and so what they're doing is they're creating that feeling of, and it's not that we're creating it, it's more like we're reflecting back that desire to really help someone connect to that sense of what's possible for them.
Hmm.
So, as a coach, the way that you might apply this to your messaging is you ask yourself, where do my ideal clients ultimately want to be? So, for example, if you're a business coach, maybe it's helping people grow their businesses past 6 figures. And well, what would it look like to live that reality and maybe the freedom that's possible because they're, not at a 9 to 5 anymore and they can be full time in their business. And so we can talk about those things and we can reflect back that desire to someone and we can create that moment where someone doesn't just feel connected to the fact that there's pain, but also sees that there's this possibility on the other side. And those two wings, pain and desire, the first of these 2 core beliefs really are, again, they're like the foundation of your messaging house. We really got to make sure that we're doing a good job bringing those into your content and your copy in order for your messaging to be effective.
Love that. And one of the things that that vision that you just painted brought up for me is a trend, a former trend in messaging that I would just like to say for a second. What I'm hearing Jason say is you paint that picture for your client. What is it? What are they going to experience? What is the difference going to be like for them versus like back in the like 2010 but it would be all about like people showing their wealth and their cars and their houses and I don't know that that really connects with people. I don't know that that feels like genuine and authentic the way. I don't know, that's just a meg feeling about
Yeah.
that. So let's make it about the client versus being about you as the coach. I guess my bias is that we never make it about ourselves. We make it about our clients. We make it about what. But I remember this big trend of like coaches showing their fancy cars or their big houses and saying this could be you too. And I don't know. I don't think that's the desire thing that Jason's talking about. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's like make your client feel like they're able to hold that for
Yeah.
themselves. What are your thoughts
I mean,
about that?
I've always had a complicated relationship with lifestyle content, which is what you're talking about. And to your point, like the struggle for me has always been like, I don't want to make it about me. I want to make it
Yeah.
about them. I think lifestyle content is one way of doing this. And that's why it's effective. You know, you see a lot of people do it. There's other ways of doing it. You don't necessarily have to show up in that way if that doesn't resonate for you. The reframe or the shift that I think can be helpful around this is it really is never about you. But even when you're showing someone maybe an embodiment of what the desire actually is through your own life, to me, I see it more like when I'm sharing those things, it's painting a possibility or a picture as to what someone else can create in their own life. So it's not like, look at me, look at my amazing
Yeah.
life with all these cars. It's more like, hey, I went through this transformation in this process, and here's how things have changed for me, or here's how life is today for me. And I know that you can do this too. I know that it's possible for you because I'm no different than you. And I
That's a
think
great reframe. Hmm.
that's the part that I think sometimes is missed in the whole conversation about life.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of people doing lifestyle content in a way that feels much more like
Kind of icky.
egocentric. Yeah,
Yeah.
where it's like look at how, you know, it's all about them versus
Right.
I think that the way to do it in a way that feels authentic and ultimately of service to your ideal clients is it's really more about them. And even when you're sharing your own lifestyle, it's showing people what's possible
What's
through
possible?
your own story.
Thank you for that reframe. And just knowing that different things are going to resonate with different clients. So it also becomes sort of how you balance. And so I love that we were able to talk about, yes, there is an option about lifestyle. Um, and and how do you balance that with these other eight beliefs as well? So thank you for
Totally.
that reframe. And so we talked about the foundational pieces of pain and desire. And the third is help. Let's talk about help.
Help's an interesting one because, you know, if you think about these, and I'm sharing them in order in the sense that these are kind of the, not that they always happen in this order, but there's a series that people of beliefs that people connect to. Number one, people have to believe they have a painful problem. Number two, they have to believe that there's something on the other side, which is desire. Number three is someone has to believe that getting help, that hiring someone to help them is a good idea. Because there's a lot of people who are like, I have a problem. There's something I don't want. There's this pain. Maybe there's something on the other side, but you know what? I can figure it out on my own. And so part of your messaging needs to kind of connect someone to that moment of like, either it doesn't make sense to do that, or it would be so much better to just get someone to help you. And so there's different ways of doing this. But one of the ways that I do it, as I talk a lot about, I mean, I've invested so much I've invested over $200,000 into hiring mentors and coaches and people to help me grow. And I do it for one simple reason, because there was a certain point in my journey as a business owner, like the first few years of my journey as in my business. I was like the proud DIYer. I was the like, you know what, if I can do it myself, I'm going to get scrappy. I'm going to watch all the YouTube videos. I'm going to read all the books. And then I remember, I had this moment because I had a really close friend of mine who was also a coach, and he was running his business, and he invested in his first mentor. And I remember I thought he was crazy. I was like, dude, you're spending that much money for hiring this, coach or whatever. But over the next few years, I watched him go from, we were in very similar places, to his business just exploded as a result of really getting in the room with these people who could help him see things that I wasn't seeing in my own life, and it showed me the power of mentorship, and it showed me that it's so much easier and faster to just get in the room with people who can help you. So that's a story that I might share. And what that does is, through my own embodiment, and through basically saying like, here's kind of what I realized, and here's how things changed for me as a result of that insight. What it does is it helps someone else connect to that moment where it's like, you know what, that makes sense. Like, if I want to move faster, probably get some help with this. So that's one way that you might do that. There's other ways we can talk about, some of the mistakes that people might be making. That's kind of another way of doing it. Doesn't necessarily feel as good, but when you're able to kind of
Right.
reflect back to someone like, hey, you might think you know what you're doing, but like, here's why you're not.
Right. Right.
What you do is you kind of create that moment or that insight for someone of like, yeah, I I don't think I can really figure this out on my own, or I feel like I'm not really getting anywhere. And
Hmm.
there are different ways to do that, but really the belief of help is about how can you connect someone to that moment where they go, I need to hire somebody. Like I don't,
Right.
it doesn't make sense for me to keep going down this path on my own. Sometimes that's just as simple as saying like, hey, if you've been in the same place for the last, couple of years, can I
Yeah.
ask you an honest question? Like, if you keep doing the same thing you have been like on your own, like what's going to change?
Right.
So there's different ways of doing it. Sometimes, through your own story, your own leadership, your own journey, talking about the story from your life that kind of shows other people how you kind of realize that, or reflecting back maybe some of the mistakes that your ideal clients might be making that they might not be aware of. Those are some common ways to go about it. But really, what we're doing is we're connecting someone to that moment where they go, yeah, I should probably get some help with this.
Right. So whether it's, and this might tie into one of your other ones, but what I'll say to coaches sometimes is until I invested in myself and really believed in myself, that shifted something for me. But I could have just continued doing and been sort of staying in the same place. So do I, it's a timing thing as well, which I know might come up later, but it's like, how much time do you want to put in doing the same thing again and again, much like what you said.
Yeah, and I love how you
Yeah.
shared that, because that story in and of itself creates a shift for somebody
Hmm.
else who might be in that kind of like, I'm valuing my time over my money mindset. And
Right.
just you talking about like how you went through that experience. This is where I think there's a level of like making it about you, but it's not really about you. It's like
But
when
you,
we're
right,
talking about our own story, we're not really making it about us. It's more about like, how can I use this story to help shift this belief for somebody else, to help create a possibility where maybe there's a barrier for somebody else? And that's a great way of doing it. So that would be the third belief, is the help belief. Someone has to have that
love
moment where
it.
they realize like, I
Right.
should get some help with this.
Because ultimately you're then offering what the help is that you would offer. But if they're not in a place of like, I'm going to hire somebody to help me, then there's a gap.
Totally.
So totally appreciate that gap. What's the fourth one?
Yeah. So pain, desire, help, and cost. Cost is a great one because there's a lot of momentum around the status quo for people, even when things are not working for us. It's hard to change. And even when we're not happy, or when we really have a desire, something that we really want, there's so many of us that just kind of keep going on the same path that we're on because it's easy, because it's convenient, because it's uncomfortable to make a change and ask for help and all these things. So cost is a belief that someone connects to that really helps create the fuel for change. Cost is someone has to kind of have that moment where they realize, hey, if I don't make a change here, things are going to get worse. That's a very powerful moment. You know, you probably think of a time in your life when maybe you were going down a path and you kind of got to that moment where you're like, enough is enough. And for most people, that is enough moment comes from the realization like, hey, if I don't change here, like there are some there's some really bad things that we're going to be headed towards down the road. So, you know, if you're a relationship coach, maybe it's like that moment when someone realizes, hey, if I don't get some help here, like we're probably headed for divorce. You know, if you're a business coach, maybe it's like someone is going to have that moment if their business is not where they want it to be, they're going to have to go back and get a job and give up their business. Uh, you know, so many examples, right? So cost is talking about that. It's like the what happens if things don't change.
The
And there
cost
are
of not
different,
taking action. Yeah.
exactly. And there are different ways of doing this. I think the best way to do any of this is just to talk about your own story. You know, like you can say, hey, I realized like I got to a certain point when I hired my first mentor, I got to a certain point. I was just like at this level, like really struggling in my business. And I realized, you know, if I didn't get some help here, I probably wasn't going to make it through the year and I would have had to go get a job. And I wasn't willing to do that because I was so committed to this.
Mhm.
That wasn't the path that I wanted to take. So you can use your own story. You can also talk about, I love sharing client stories. Like when I'll share client stories,
Mhm.
sometimes I'll use like client stories to be able to illustrate these beliefs. So I might say, like, you know, Zach was an incredible coach who had so much to offer. And when I met him, like I knew he had what it took to build a thriving, successful business, but he was just really, you know, having a hard time getting clients. And he was at that place where he realized if things didn't change, he was going to have to give up his business. Just an example of like using a client story as
Mhm.
a way of kind of like getting into this belief. So there are different ways we can do this, but the core belief is how do we connect someone to that moment of like, you know what? If things don't change, things are going to get worse. And that creates that leverage for someone where they have that moment where they're like, okay, I'm not going to keep going down this road because I don't want that. And that creates the fuel for change.
So good. So it's sort of like the cost of not doing anything is no longer tolerable, which
Yeah.
I would, say that then that might roll into considering the cost of taking it, like the investment of taking action is worth it. Um,
Yeah.
so
Someone has to, I
love
always
that.
describe
Yeah.
like whenever there's a transaction taking place, I think of it as like a scale. You know, if you
Hmm.
imagine like like a scale where you have like on one
Yeah.
side you have like what's the cost of doing this? Because there's always a
Right.
cost of doing something. There's the money that you're asking for. There's the time, the energy that someone's going to invest into the process. And then on the other side, it's like, what am I going to get? And what's the cost of like staying where I am? And so your
Right.
job in sales and marketing is to kind of tip those scales. And it's all about how
Right.
someone sees their situation. So when you can help
Hmm.
someone orient more around like, hey, look how much pain is involved in staying where you are, then the cost of actually, to your point, like actually taking the leap and investing and working with you and creating that change feels like it feels like it makes sense within the context of where their mind is oriented.
Exactly, because until the cost of staying where we're at exceed the pain of that or the the cost of that it
Yeah.
outweighs the cost of doing something different because change we're all resistant to change. I mean, it's just part of being human. So when I was a therapist, I would say to my clients, until the pain or the cost of continuing to do things the way you're doing exceeds whatever your perceived cost is of doing something different. Until that exceeds it, you're going to keep doing things the way that you're doing things.
That's it.
So,
100%. Yeah.
and often when we step into the change, it wasn't as bad as we thought it was, so all that perception and all that assumption that we made, and in that, what are all of you who are listening, what assumptions are you making about stepping into a change? And what are your clients? What are the assumptions your clients might be making? So,
Yeah, well said. And we'll definitely talk about that with the
okay,
objections belief because there's
excellent.
some good stuff there for sure.
All right, so let's keep this rolling.
All right. So at this point, we've got pain, desire, help, and cost. Someone's connected to these four things, they're ready to change. And they're looking for the next thing is they're looking for, at this point, they're not actually looking for someone to help them. The first thing they look for is a process that can help them. People are much more interested. I mean, these things are kind of interchangeable. Sometimes they like
Right, right.
someone might connect more to like a person before they connect to a
Mm-hmm.
process. But oftentimes people don't really care that much about the person. The first thing they care about is like, I just need like a process that I can follow to get to where I want to be, you know?
Yeah, right. Make a map for me here. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, I use this example quite a bit, but Alcoholics Anonymous, I've never been an alcoholic and I don't really have any personal relationship with people who have, but everyone knows AA. Like it's like a
Mm-hmm.
well-known thing and it's a huge
Yeah.
organization. And you might ask yourself, like, why is it that this organization that exists to help and I'm sure I don't know the numbers, but I'm sure there are many people who struggle with addiction to alcohol, but this is an organization that is so well known. It's like, why? Why? Well, I would argue it's because they have the 12 steps.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're an alcoholic, even if you're not an alcoholic, when you hear 12 steps, that creates a lot of safety
Right.
because you see that and you're like, okay, if I know that I have pain is I'm struggling with alcoholism, and I have a desire, I want to be free from this, and I know I need help because I haven't been able to get there on my own. And I am connected to the cost because I know if things don't change, there's going to be a lot of negative consequences. And then I see that there are these 12 steps that I can follow to get from where I am today to where I want to be. I'm like, yes, I want that. It creates
Sign me
so
up for
much
that
safety.
process. Yes.
Yeah, because like we want our mind, our rational mind, our intellectual mind wants to see that there's a roadmap, that there's a process. Because we're afraid of just leaping into the unknown. Like
Right.
that's a scary thing to do.
Absolutely.
But when
Yeah.
someone says to us, like, hey, when I work with people to help them grow their businesses, I have this four-step, system or this four-step process. First we start here, then we start here, and then we do this. And that's how I help people. Creates a ton of safety. It creates a sense of certainty around like, okay, I can see that this person has steps. That makes me feel like much more confident that this is going to work. So process is all about that. It's about showing people that you have a roadmap. And I think the most important thing when you're sharing your process is someone sees that there's like clear steps. You
Right.
don't have to get super into the weeds on like what the steps
No.
are. It's mostly just that someone can have that moment where they're like, okay, there are steps. That feels safe to me. And also, I think it's really important when you're sharing your process that you help someone connect to that feeling of like, oh, this is different from what I've tried.
Right.
Because if you ask yourself the question, like, okay, my ideal clients, maybe you're a health coach and maybe you're helping people, lose weight as just an example. It's like, what have these people tried before? They've probably tried, the keto diet and they've tried this and like they're
Right.
here because like those things haven't worked. In order for them to buy into your process, they got to feel like what you're offering is different from what they've tried before.
Right.
So, like, for example, I only offer one on one coaching today. And I was running for a long time, I was running a large group program. And I don't have anything against groups. I think they're great. But one of the things when I pitch one on one today, I talk about like, hey, if you've been through group programs, like oftentimes, you got to show up to these big calls. And, sometimes like, I mean, I talk to a lot of people who are just like, I just want to get my questions answered. Like, I don't want to show up to a Zoom call and wait 40 minutes and all the things. So when you work with me one on one, it's me and you in the trenches together, and you're going to get like on-demand Telegram text message access to me, which means you
Right.
don't have to show up to calls. And if you've been through that before and maybe that hasn't worked for you, like so many people come to me and they're like, this is so much better because I basically just have a direct
Right.
line of communication with you. That's an example of basically, here's a process, here's why it's different from what you've tried, and here's why this might work for you, even if you tried that other thing and it hasn't worked in the past. So
Love that.
high level is what's your process? What are the steps? And creating that sense of safety for somebody through showing people that you have a roadmap that they can follow to get to where they want to be.
One of the things that strikes me about that is a long time ago, I heard the phrase, confused minds don't buy. When I'm confused about what's this process, and to your point, it's not about getting into the weeds of the process, but actually saying there is a map that we're going to follow together. And I know, and I'm confident in that map. I'm going to show you the way. It, if I'm fuzzy or foggy or like, what's the voodoo that's going on here or whatever, I'm probably not going to buy. But if you can say, I've got a process, I've got a proven process, it's like, oh, and to your point, Jason, and it's different. It's unique. It's going to be tailored. It's whatever,
Yeah.
this like, oh, okay, you've got me. So
So much
that
safety in
safety
that.
comes in. Yeah, yeah.
I love what you
Love
said too
that.
about not getting too into the weeds, because this is one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they share their process is they think they have to tell people all about how all the
Oh,
things work and what's involved. And the more you give people, the more you're going to create overwhelm. What you want to do is
right.
just keep it super high level. It's like step one, step two, step three, and just give someone enough where that part of their mind that's like, okay, I'm not going to jump into the abyss into nothing. I need
Right.
something to hold on to. You give them a little bit to hold on to, and then that creates the safety, but you don't want to get into the weeds because that's going to create a bunch of overwhelm. And to your point, a
Exactly.
confused mind never buys.
Excellent. All right. So we've talked about pain. We've talked about desire. We've talked about recognizing the need for help, the cost of not doing anything, the the clarity and safety that comes with process. What's next?
So at this point, someone's connected to that process. They also have to buy into you as the guide that can help them actually get to where they want to be. So the guide belief or the expert, I've called it different things. I used to call it expert belief. And I've started calling it the guide belief. And there's a difference there because expert is kind of like hierarchical and kind of more like old school internet marketing
Hmm.
guru where it's like I'm the person who has all the answers. And I don't think that's what it's about. I think it's the I like this word guide because what it really does is it kind of it positions you in a way where someone sees you as having expertise and being able to help them facilitate this transformation. That's kind of what you need to connect someone to. And so there's
Hmm.
different ways to do this. It's not about you looking like you have all the answers or, being some kind of guru sage on the stage type thing, but more so just authentically being able to connect someone to that sense of like, I really know what I'm doing and I can really help people. And I've helped, Mary and Paul and all these other people. And I've been doing this for 18 years and I've helped, at this point, I've worked with 2,000 clients. And I mean, your version of that is going to be different. But
Right.
really, what you're doing is you're creating that moment where someone goes, okay, I trust that you have a process, but I also trust that you're the right person to help me, actually go through this
Right.
transformation. So you can, do this through sharing testimonials. You can do this through sharing your own credibility and just talking about your own experience. Sometimes it's just about sharing your own story. That's a great way of doing this
Hmm.
too, where you can say, hey, like, I mean, for example, when I talk about, there was a point in my business my first year as a coach where I made $4,728. And, now I'm running a business doing 500,000 a year in sales. I figured out some things along the way. And
Right.
so that's like an authentic way of just saying, yeah, I'm a guide. Like I really know how to do this because I've struggled a lot and I've helped a lot of people do this too. So different ways that you can connect someone to that, but the guide belief or the expert belief is really about that. It's connecting someone to somebody to that moment where they go, "You're my person. You're the right person to actually help me with this."
So good. So I hope all of you are beginning to think, this is how I weave it into my messaging. And Jason is giving great examples of how do you weave that into, how do you create the story? How do you create the vision that you're inviting people into your world through your messaging, through your posts, through your emails, those kinds of things. So let's continue on our way. And what is the next core belief?
So we're getting close to the end here. And at this point, you've done a good job connecting people to all these. I think we've done 6 at this point. Someone's like, "You're my person. You got the process. I know I want to change, but dot dot dot." And this is what the 7th belief is about, which is objections. What are all the buts? What are all the excuses? What are all the reasons that someone's going to give themselves not to take action? And so you might ask yourself and just reflect on this in terms of, and if you've done a lot of sales calls, you probably hear these things like again and again and again on client calls, like oh, I don't have the money, or, I'm afraid it's not going to work for me because I'm X, or maybe it's not the right time. I got a lot going on in my life right now, or dot, dot, dot. The objections are different depending on the niche, but
Mm-hmm.
there's some common ones. Time and money are
Right.
probably the biggest
Right.
ones that come up. And so the objection belief is all about someone having that moment where all those things are clear. They're like, there's nothing holding me back from taking action. And so a lot of great messaging, what it does is it helps someone reframe or shift their perspective around those objections. So I love asking my clients, like, can we make a list of the top 3 objections that people have that are going to hold them back from saying yes? And then what's a story that you might tell if we just look at, let's say, I don't know, for example, I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's say the time belief, like I don't have enough
Mm-hmm.
time to do this. So, you- like you might ask yourself a question like, well, what's a story that I could tell that would help somebody reframe the way they think about that? I might say like, there was a time in my business where I had a million things going on and I was working like, 60 hours a week and, just pushing really hard. And I remember having this conversation with a business mentor and I said, I don't even know if I have enough time to actually go through this program because I got so much work going on. And he told me something that I'll never forget. He said, Jason, half the things that you're doing right now probably don't need to be done. And the very reason that you're so overwhelmed is the exact reason that you should probably be working with me so that we can get clear on what you actually need to be doing. And you don't have to waste your time doing all these things that aren't necessary in order to move your business forward. So you could keep going down this road, keep working so hard, doing a bunch of things that you probably don't need to do, or you can get in the room with someone who can help you pare down the stuff that you're doing so you can focus on what really matters. And so the fact that you're overwhelmed doesn't mean you shouldn't do this. The fact that you're overwhelmed is actually even more of a reason to invest in yourself so you can get the clarity you need to work less and to not be doing so many things that aren't working. So that's an example of like a
Right.
reframe, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
helping somebody see that objection differently. And I love this way of working with objections as this thing that we can look at that you're seeing this as a reason to put on the brakes actually is the very reason you should be doing this.
Right. Right.
So we can work with this in different ways. And obviously I think it's very important when I share all these things is like that has to be true. That can't be like
Right.
there's an ethics piece to this too, where, you have to be honest and upfront and transparent about what you're sharing. But that objections belief is really just what are the things that are holding somebody back and how can I create content and messaging that helps someone shift their perspective on those things so that they're no longer barriers.
Love that. And for anybody who's saying, well, let's not bring up the objections. If we're bringing, well, the objections are there. So if you are,
Yeah.
it's sort of like, oh, if I don't talk about it, nobody will see it. No, those objections are bubbling up in your clients anyway. So just weave the responses to those objections into your natural content. So you're responding to objections that are within your clients just naturally, and it gives them a reframe. It gives them a different perspective. It gives them a different way to look at it because not everybody who's reading your stuff is necessarily going to come forward with their objection. But if you've already answered their objection, it's going to increase the likelihood that they reach out.
Yeah. And you're either going to deal with this stuff on a sales call, on the back end of a sales call. People are often like, well, how do I get on a sales call and make it so that I don't have a bunch of objections? I'm like, well, if you do all of this stuff in your content, people will show up to those calls having already reframed and worked through a lot of those things, and your sales process is going to be so much easier. And oftentimes when I'm working with clients who are transitioning and growing their business, and we're looking at like, how do we do more selling via text message or through sales pages? Like, how do we make it so we don't have to get on the phone with people who are buying from us? A lot of this is like, how do we move the selling process more into your marketing? So we do more objection handling and stuff like that in your content rather than in a sales conversation. So yeah, incredibly useful, powerful stuff. And we definitely want to talk
So
about those
good.
things.
So good. Okay. We are rolling along and we've got one more, right?
We're at the end. Yeah, the 8 of the 8 core beliefs. So at this point, someone's got no objections holding them back. They're like right there, right? But the eighth belief is super important too, which is timing. And timing is really someone needs a reason to take action now. And when I say now, I mean in this moment.
Urgency. Yes.
Yeah, urgency is another word. Like someone needs a reason to actually do something. And so in your messaging, a big part of this is connecting somebody to that moment where they go, okay, now's the time. Now's the time to send the email. Now's the time to submit the application. Now's the time to sign up. And there's different ways of doing this. There's kind of two ways of doing this. There's what I would call internal urgency, and then there's external urgency. Internal urgency is like someone's own internal reason to take action. And usually this is the best way to do this is like it's connecting somebody to their own like desire. It's like, hey, look, 2025 could be an incredible year for you, or it could be just like 2024 and 2023. And like, isn't it about time that you claim the path and the calling and the business that you know you deserve? Like, let's do this. Come on, you have so much to give and share and like contribute. And like, let's make it happen today. That's an example of connecting somebody to that sense of like their own internal
Mm-hmm.
reason to say yes. And
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the best way to do it. External urgency is all the things that we do to try to create that from the outside in. That's registration is closing on Friday. We only have 25 spots available. If you don't sign up by the end of the day, it's going away and we're launching the thing. That could be this is a good
Right,
reason for
right.
somebody to take action. I'm not saying don't do that. Um, I think that obviously it has to be authentic. It has to be real. Don't say the doors are closing when they're not closing.
When they're
Don't
really
say you only
not.
have 25 spots when you have unlimited slots. That I hate that stuff. That drives me crazy. Like whenever I see a webinar landing page and it's like only 100 spots, I'm like, it's a webinar. You got 1 million spots. You don't have 100 spots. Don't lie to me. So I think that's very important. We don't want to lie. We want to be authentic in how we use these things, but there's got to be some reason for somebody to take action and
Mhm.
to create that moment where someone goes, now's the right time. And so that is the 8 of these 8 core beliefs. And obviously different ways you can do that depending on how you're selling and where you're communicating. If you're doing a launch, it might look slightly different. Sometimes when you're doing a launch, it's like it's built in. It's like, okay, well, the launch is ending on Friday. So this offer is only available through Friday.
Right.
And great, we can make sure to talk about that. Sometimes it's just, creating more of that internal connection where you're really connecting somebody back to their own reason to say yes in that moment. And we can do that through your content, even when you're not doing a launch or something like that. But yeah, some way of doing that I think is really important. And that is the 8 of these 8 core beliefs.
So, so good. So, Jason, as we are wrapping up our time together, any remaining thoughts of sort of going back into the that in order to have the clients to do the work that you want, you've got to get messaging out there. Um, this would, I would assume, feed into our personal brand. The way that we do this kind of messaging feeds into who we are and what we do. So, just kind of wrapping up, what are some things that you want to be sure people walk away from this interview thinking about?
Well, the first thing is this is like drinking from a fire hose. I just want to acknowledge that this is a framework that you could sit with for years and really like marinate in. So, on a practical level, what I recommend with my clients is I would just write down the 8 core beliefs. I'd print them out. I'd put them on a sheet of paper next to your computer monitor or something like that. And when you're writing your content, what we want to do is we just kind of want to weave those into everything that you share. It's not that we have to include all of these in every piece of content that you create,
Oh,
but
yeah,
I think of it
that would
more
be
like, okay,
confusing.
it would be very, it would be a lot. I mean, sometimes like when you're writing a sales page or something like that, you might
Right,
see all of these on one page.
right.
But for the most part, you just look at those and you say, okay, well, maybe I'm going to write a post where I talk a little bit about like the pain and desire today. So I might use my own story as a way of doing that. And maybe I'm going to talk about like the help belief. And we just kind of cycle through these in various pieces of content. So on a practical level, that is how you would actually work with these things. And then the way to make this work with a personal brand, I think a lot of this is infusing your own storytelling into it, being able to pull pieces from your own life and your own journey and your own experience that help somebody connect to these eight core beliefs. I think that's the best way to do it. Anything that's shared through personal perspective is just so much more inviting. It feels less markety. It feels
Right.
more like you're telling me a story you're not selling to me. So, for example, if I'm talking about the pain belief, instead of saying, like, do you ever feel like you're struggling to get clients? I might say, when I first started my first few years as a coach, I knew I had so much to give, but I just really didn't know how to get clients. And I was having a really hard time. I was showing up, I was doing all the things, but clients were super inconsistent. It was super frustrating because I knew I could help people. I just didn't know how to get people in the door. That's an example of like using my own storytelling as a way of sharing
Right.
pain, but it's so much more accessible. So, what I would say is print these 8 core beliefs out, look at them, weave them into your content, tell stories from your life. And that ultimately, I think, is the way to make it feel authentic and feel like it's you because it is. It's through your own lens and your own perspective.
Love that. And yet it's using experience from this guide who has joined us today, who has walked a path of frustration and confusion about how do I fill my practice and learned and put this together. And I'm so grateful that you brought the process to us. And so I want people to realize that what Jason's just walked us through is exactly. He exhibited all 8 of the core beliefs today, including this process of using these 8 core beliefs to help you with your marketing and to help you think about your messaging. And I'm so grateful that you brought that to the Star Coach audience. So thank you, Jason.
I'm happy to do it. This is powerful stuff, so it's exciting to get to share it with your audience.
So if you want to know more about Jason and the work that he does, once again, if you're watching us on YouTube, just grab those links right below this video. If you're listening on all the places that the Star Coach Show uh, is heard, then be sure to grab the show notes at starcoachshow.com. Remember to subscribe wherever you're listening so that you never miss a minute of the Star Coach content. And just as we're closing out, I want to remind everyone that we are on this earth together. We are here, each of us has our own purpose, and we don't need to be looking at everybody as though they're different or pulling away from what we have to offer. If we put all of our energy and all of our focus and all of our love together, then we do the heavy lifting together. So, with that, be kind to yourself, be kind to one another, and be sure to come back next week for another episode of the Star Coach Show. Thank you once again, Jason Moss, for joining us.